Every single time, it's an old man in a mask. That's the joke. That's the punchline the entire internet has repeated for 50 years. It was Old Man Jenkins the whole time. We laugh, we move on, nobody asks the question underneath the joke. Why was Old Man Jenkins in that mask in the first place? Not why did he want to scare kids away? That part's obvious. The real question is bigger, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. Why does almost every single town Mystery Incorporated drives into already look like it's dying before the ghost even shows up? Empty amusement parks, boarded factories, museums nobody visits, mines shut down for decades, mansions with the lights off and the paint peeling. Over 100 episodes, same pattern, every time. What if the mystery was never really about the ghost? What if the actual mystery, the one nobody solved, was sitting in the background the entire time, dressed up as scenery? I want to walk you through something. Call it a theory, call it a coincidence if you want. We'll get to that argument too, and it's stronger than you'd think. But by the end of this, you may never watch a rerun of that van pulling into another sleepy, half-abandoned town the same way again. Because here's the thing that should bother you. Nobody in that show ever asks why the town looks like this, not once. Fred never says, "Hey, why is this home community broke?" Velma never researches the local economy. They just drive in, solve the ghost, drive out, as if it's normal, as if it's just how towns look. Is it normal? Or is it a pattern so consistent it stopped looking like a choice and started looking like a message? Let's start with what's actually there, not speculation, just counting. Think about the locations. An abandoned amusement park that used to draw families from 3 counties, now rusted shut behind a chain-link fence. A textile mill that once employed half the town, now just broken windows and pigeons. A grand old hotel that hasn't had a guest in a decade. A gold mine that dried up, taking the town's entire reason for existing along with it. A wax museum nobody funds anymore. A mansion the family can't afford to keep, sitting on land that's suddenly, mysteriously, worth a fortune. Individually, none of that means anything. Spooky places make good spooky episodes. That's just set design, right? But watch what happens when you stop looking at the locations one at a time and start looking at what's underneath them. Ask yourself, why is it always property? Why is it never a stranger with a grudge showing up out of nowhere? Why is the villain, almost without exception, someone who already had a connection to the town? A relative, a business partner, a former employee, a landowner, someone who was already there before the haunting started. That's stage 1, the familiar layer, the one you already knew even if you never put words to it. Now here's where it gets uncomfortable. Go back through the roster of unmasked villains. Actually list their motives. Not he was evil. What did he specifically want? He wanted people to think the land was cursed, so the price would drop, so he could buy it cheap. She wanted people to stay away from the old estate, so nobody would find out the family fortune was already gone, and she needed time to sell off what was left before anyone noticed. He wanted the mine emptied of a competing claim so he could quietly reopen it under his own name. He needed the amusement park condemned so the insurance payout would clear his debts. He was smuggling goods through the tunnels beneath the factory because the factory itself no longer made him money honestly. Do you see it yet? Not one of these people wanted the world. Not one of them wanted revenge for its own sake. Every single one of them wanted money, land, or survival. And they wanted it because in the world of the story, something had already gone wrong economically before Mystery Incorporated ever showed up. The ghost isn't the disease, the ghost is the symptom. So here's the unanswered question I want you sitting with for the rest of this video. if nearly every single villain's true motive was financial desperation or financial greed dressed up as a ghost story, what does that say about the towns these people lived in? What kind of place produces this many people willing to fake a haunting just to survive or just to get ahead?
I'm not going to answer that yet. Hold on to it. Because there's a piece of context most people watching these episodes as kids never had, and it changes how the pattern reads. The original series premiered in 1969. Think about what that decade actually looked like outside the cartoon. Automation was quietly gutting manufacturing towns across the country. Small regional attractions, the roadside museums, the little amusement parks, the family-run mines and mills were losing out to bigger interstate highways that routed tourists somewhere else entirely. Entire local economies that had been built around a single industry were starting to hollow out, one boarded storefront at a time. Now, I need to be careful here, because this is exactly where a theory can tip over into nonsense if you're not honest about it. There is no interview, no writer's note, no production memo that says, "We are building this show around deindustrialization." Nothing like that exists. The creators have talked plenty about where the show came from: old radio mysteries, Sherlock Holmes riffs, the desire for spooky but safe settings a network would approve for kids on a Saturday morning. Nobody involved has ever claimed a hidden economic thesis. So if there's no smoking gun, why does the pattern feel so consistent? Maybe because the writers weren't inventing these locations from nothing. They were pulling from what already existed around them. A shuttered amusement park wasn't a fantasy set piece in 1969. It was something you could actually drive past. A dying mill town wasn't science fiction. It was Tuesday in parts of the country. If you need a believable abandoned building for a kid's mystery show and the culture around you is already full of real abandoned buildings, you don't need a hidden agenda to end up drawing from that well. You just need to be paying attention to the world you're writing in. That's stage 2, the inconsistency. The gap between "this looks intentional" and "we have zero proof it was." And that gap is exactly where this theory either falls apart or gets more interesting. Because here's what I haven't told you yet. It's not just the locations, it's not just the motives. There's a third layer, and this is the one that took me the longest to notice, because it's not in what the show says, it's in what the show refuses to say. Count how many times across the entire original run anyone in Mystery Incorporated actually addresses the town's economic condition out loud. Go on, try to find it. You won't. Not once. Not a single line of dialogue acknowledges that the reason Grandpa's amusement park is empty might be the same reason half the buildings on Main Street are boarded up. The show sees the wreckage every episode and never once lets its characters actually see it. Unless the silence itself is the point. Unless the show wasn't built to comment on decline, it was built to use decline as wallpaper. So consistently, so casually, that an entire generation absorbed the image of the failing American town without ever being told that's what they were looking at. Sit with that for a second, because that's stage 3, and stage 3 is where this stops being about ghost costumes. If a piece of children's entertainment shows you the same economic ruin week after week, year after year, without ever naming it as ruin, what does that train a young audience to see as normal? Not evil, not tragic, just scenery. Just the backdrop mysteries happen in front of. A generation of kids who grew up thinking a boarded-up factory is simply where a spooky story takes place, not evidence that somebody's town collapsed. I'm not saying that was deliberate. I want to be honest with you. I don't think anyone sat in a writer's room in 1969 and decided to desensitize children to industrial decline. That's not where this is going. But whether or not it was designed this way, that's what the pattern does. Now here's the
twist. Here's the part that reframes everything I just told you. I said the villains were driven by greed or desperation. I said the towns looked like they were struggling. But go back and look closer at who specifically keeps showing up as the unmasked culprit. It's not usually the desperate, it's usually the comfortable. The property developer, the land surveyor, the museum's own curator, the theme park's own owner, the bank's own representative. Again and again, the person faking the haunting isn't some outsider preying on a broken town. It's someone who already holds power inside that town, using its weakness against the town itself. That changes the whole shape of the theory, doesn't it? This isn't a story about communities falling apart by accident. It's a story about who benefits when a community falls apart. Every haunted mansion, every cursed amusement park, every unsellable plot of land conveniently haunted until the person who staged the haunting can buy it cheap. That's not random. That's the oldest story in the book, just wearing a glow-in-the-dark sheet. Mystery Incorporated wasn't just solving ghost stories. Episode after episode, without ever saying so, they were catching the exact same crime. Someone with existing power exploiting a place that was already hurting for personal gain. And they never once called it that. They called it the mystery of the phantom. They called it the ghost of Elder Island. They gave it a spooky name and moved on to the next town and the next abandoned building and the next well-dressed man behind the mask. So let's go back to the counter-argument because it deserves real weight, not a dismissal. The strongest case against all of this is simple. Mystery fiction has always used abandoned places. Gothic novels did it a century before Scooby-Doo existed. Empty mansions, condemned buildings, deserted fairgrounds. These aren't economic commentary, they're just atmosphere. They're empty because empty is scary, and scary is the entire genre. A show doesn't need a hidden thesis about industrial decline to know that a rotting carnival looks creepier than a thriving one. That's not subtext, that's just set design 101, older than the medium itself.
And honestly, that argument holds up. It's probably on its own the single most reasonable explanation for why these locations exist. Sometimes an abandoned mine is just a good place for a chase scene. But here's why I don't think that fully closes the case. Atmosphere explains the setting. It doesn't explain the motive. A Gothic novel doesn't need its villain's reason for haunting the house to be a real estate scheme 40 times in a row. You can get spooky atmosphere from a haunted house story where the ghost is just a ghost, or a family curse, or grief. Scooby-Doo almost never does that. It reaches for financial motive again and again, far more consistently than atmosphere alone would require. The setting might just be genre convention. The motive is a choice, repeated so often it stops looking accidental. So where does that actually leave us? Not at Scooby-Doo secretly takes place during a nationwide economic collapse. That version of the theory is too big, it doesn't hold up, and it isn't what the evidence actually supports. Here's the version that does hold up. Not one collapsing country, dozens of quietly collapsing towns, each with their own local decline, each producing exactly the conditions where fraud becomes attractive. When property values crash, someone benefits from making people believe the land is cursed. When an industry dies, someone benefits from scaring off the people who might discover what's really happening in the empty factory. When a family's money runs out, someone benefits from convincing the world the mansion is haunted, buying time before the truth comes out. The ghosts were never separate from the town's condition. The ghosts were the mechanism the story kept using to explain why economic desperation turns into deception. Whether the writers meant to build that pattern or simply absorbed it from the world around them in 1969, the pattern is there. 100 episodes of towns already broken before the mystery starts. 100 villains whose real crime underneath the mask was exploiting that brokenness for money. and 100 endings where the mask comes off, the town breathes a sigh of relief, and nobody ever asks the question that actually mattered. Why was this town like this to begin with? That question never gets answered in the show, not once in the entire original run. The gang unmasks the man, they never unmask the town. So I'll leave you with this. Next time you watch one of those old episodes, really watch the first 30 seconds before the ghost even appears. Look at the building, look at what it used to be and what it clearly isn't anymore. And ask yourself whether that's just where a mystery happens to take place, or whether that's the actual mystery, the one the show never solved on purpose.